This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, real MVPs? We are back for episode 2 of What's Your Fantasy? Again, fantasy football, not anything else you creeps may have been thinking about. Brandon Swanson across the table is Ricky Widmer.
What's up? The one thing I wish we could do was Ludacris, we know you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, Luda. We know you love us, but if you want to give us the rights and give us permission to use What's Your Fantasy as the opening bed, it would be highly appreciated.
Recommended, actually.
Because I think that would be, that is the perfect song, instrumental beat to be our opening is What's Your Fantasy by Ludacris.
I think that we should get in touch with his agents. Our agents should get in touch with his agents.
I think we do. Our people need to contact his people.
We'll have lunch. Well, folks, as always, we have to get into the housekeeping stuff at the beginning. You can become a patron through Patreon, patreon.com. Make sure you do that. You can support this podcast, this show. You can come on one of these shows. $10 a month can get you on here to talk with Ricky and I about fantasy football.
You could be the first for What's Your Fantasy.
I was going to say, or it could get you on any other podcast on MVP. Also, you can go and get an MVP t-shirt. You can go to the store on mostvaluablepodcast.com and do that. So we're all about everyone wearing that gear outside of, obviously, us today. But Ricky wears it more than me.
I do.
That's for sure. Probably everyone.
I don't think I've ever seen you in it.
No. No, I have not been in it for a show. I have not. But I have to, so that we can just have that go out the window and then, I can stop looking like a non-supporter. But so those things, and then finally go and check us out on iTunes. And Ricky, you've got the what will you say?
Oh yeah, the 5-star, because we're not a couple of good old boys, but for What's Your Fantasy, we're still working on the kinks to getting us on iTunes. So just go give a 5-star, if you would please, to all the podcasts at MVP, mainly the Primetime Podcast, because we are not a couple of good old boys. I will continue to say that. We are not a couple of good old boys.
Every single week. I love it. I freaking love it.
Ever since I read it, it hit a nerve with me because it is completely not true. It is completely not true.
Well, one of the things that is true is Le'Veon Bell has not showed up. He has not signed his franchise tender, and right now it certainly does not look like Le'Veon Bell is going to be joining the Steelers and playing in Week 1, but we will get to that here in a little bit. But first, what we wanted to talk about is this past weekend, actually just a couple of days ago, Ricky drafted for our team, and you'll see that's why it's a little weaker than I would have liked it to be.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I'm just backing it up now.
Sorry,
over and back.
I will say, and I said this right after the live stream, I think coming out of the draft, Jake has the best team in our fantasy football league, because I will read it to you, Brandon, and everyone else. He's got Tom Brady, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Juju Smith, Jordan Reed, Kerryon Johnson, the Jaguars, Steven Gostkowski, and then he's got Pierre Garçon, Sanu, Tyler Lockett, Theo Riddick, Latavius Murray, Mike Gesicki, and Eli Manning. The bench isn't great, but that starting lineup, without injuries, might cause people some trouble this year in our league.
His tight end position is really weak. Is really weak. Jordan Reed.
But everything else is strong.
Jordan Reed will not be healthy enough to actually get any stats.
Hey, at least I got us Kyle Rudolph, man. I got us a solid tight end to
Thank
work
God.
with.
Thank God you got us a number of Vikings players. I couldn't be...
Only 2?
You got 3, because you got the Vikings defense for us as well.
But that's a solid defense. It's not like it's a bad defense.
Whatever. This is what we're working with here, folks. We've got Aaron Rodgers, Todd Gurley, all about that. Mark
we
Ingram.
were the number 1 pick.
That's what you had said.
Yeah,
That's what you had said.
number 1 pick.
Mark Ingram, suspended for the first 4 weeks. If he comes back, and when I saw that, I'm like, really?
When he comes back.
Really? You got the guy who was suspended for 4 weeks?
When he comes back.
And you currently have him in the starting lineup, so you're going to have to take him out of that.
Yeah, he will.
But Mark Ingram, and hopefully he does his thing when he gets back. Adam Thielen these are our 2 starting wide receivers currently. Adam Thielen and Julian Edelman. Edelman, again, suspended for the first 4 weeks. But Julian Edelman's he's a solid guy. I like him. And based on what you're saying, it sounds like we couldn't have gotten too much better. But Adam Thielen, I saw Adam Thielen, and Ricky said this to me. He goes, well, it could have been Adam Thielen. It could have been Stephon Diggs. It could have been
Mike Evans.
Or
Tyreek Hill.
Mike Evans? You don't go with Mike Evans? I understand his touchdown production was down last season. Ricky goes, I don't like Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay sucks, but doesn't mean that you're not going to get fantasy production out of their top players. You moron.
Which is funny because in the later rounds when there was like small pickings, I did take Ronald Jones as a Tampa Bay player. He's going to be the starter, though, so we'll be fine later in the year.
Maybe he will.
He's going to win that starting job.
I don't know. They got like 4 guys over there. But anyways, let me just finish out the starting lineup. Then you got Kyle Rudolph. I like that. You got Lamar Miller in the flex. Miller is going to...
I've already fixed our starting lineup, so it's changed.
No, okay, so I just have to refresh here?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Okay, so now Todd Gurley, Lamar Miller, Adam Thielen, Rashard Matthews. Gosh, that's weak. That is so weak at wide receiver. Kyle Rudolph, Will Fuller gets weaker. The Vikings defense and Graham Gano, and that's fine.
I would
actually probably put Calvin Ridley in there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask: is should I take Rashard Matthews out and put Calvin Ridley in?
I would almost put Calvin Ridley in actually, but
for Rashard Matthews,
possibly.
Bingo. It's done. It's done.
Okay.
It's done, Brandon. It's done. He's in there. So now it's Thielen, Ridley, and Fuller. Unless you want to start like Muscle Hamster or Benjamin Watson.
No. Benjamin Watson, I think, is actually going to have a decent year. But so that's our team. That's our starting lineup. Ricky.
Yeah.
How do you think this team's going to fare this year? Especially in week 1.
It's like I said, like there are some teams where, for example, like the first team we are going up against, which is Austin's team, Austin Matlock, who I'll be honest, when he said he signed up for the league, he said good luck because he's very confident that he's going to win the league, which no, you're not, because we're going to win the league.
Austin, I like your name, though, of Hide and Zeke.
Well, and his team of like like his running backs are good. He's got Zeke and Howard. His wide receivers to me are weaker than ours. Marvin Jones, I wouldn't touch any Detroit. I wouldn't touch anyone on Detroit. Not Matthew Stafford right now. Because Kerryon Johnson hasn't proven himself.
I'll be honest with you though. I don't know why you wouldn't want to touch anyone on Detroit. Is this a PPR league?
Yes.
This is a PPR league. So you have Matthew Stafford, who's a solid quarterback. You have Marvin Jones, who really came on the scene last year because he was not injured at all during the season. Hold on, I've got some points here. So you have that. And he catches a lot of the deep balls, gets a lot of the touchdowns. You've got Golden Tate, who's across the middle, getting you a lot of catches. And then at tight end, what we saw yesterday from the Madden game, Luke Wilson's going to be really good.
Yeah,
but
Lions guy was tearing it up.
I really don't understand the hate towards these Lions players from a fantasy perspective. It doesn't make sense.
Here's my main point, what I was getting at. Marvin Jones, Corey Davis. Then you've got Marquise Goodwin, Michael Gallup, Mike Williams, and former Illinois Illini, Geronimo Allison. You're going to tell me that those wide receivers are not weaker than our wide receivers? Like, you called my drafting of wide receivers weak. I think our wide receivers are better than that set of wide receivers.
Yeah, probably, but I think that if you look over, if it's between Thielen and Ridley and Marvin Jones, I would take Marvin Jones.
Like, Corey Davis didn't do anything last year. I'm talking about Davis. You can have one wide receiver. We've got more quality wide receivers than Austin has, though. That's all I'm saying. Although his running backs, spot on. I wanted Jordan Howard, and he sniped him from me the pick before I was going to take him. He sniped Jordan Howard from me, and that's why I had to go with that was when I went with Mark Ingram, because I'm like, he's going to come back. He'll be fine after the suspension. We'll just have to make do until he comes back from the suspension. Same with Julian Edelman. He'll be fine after that 4-game suspension.
Corey Davis, no one knows what Corey Davis is going to do. I mean, he was such a highly sought after guy, wide receiver coming out of college, somebody who was going to do so well and have an immediate impact, and he immediately got injured. And that has been such a downfall and a letdown for fantasy owners and Tennessee fans and the like. So Corey Davis, we really don't know. We can't say anything about Corey Davis yet because he hasn't proven anything to this point. But hopefully this will be the season where he's able to prove some things. Hopefully not in week 1 against us. But I like that we're favored in the game. That's nice. That is very nice. I mean, Todd Gurley, if Todd Gurley shows up, that's going to be really good. Aaron Rodgers should do his thing, most likely. We just need Lamar Miller to be serviceable. I think it's so nice that they have Adam Thielen pegged for 15.1 points. That he must have about 9 catches because we know he's not going to have that much production. I mean I like what we're seeing here for week 1, but you never know what's going to happen in week 1. You know, there's so many things that happen in a week 1 game. That's why ultimately we look at our team. I look at our team. I'm okay with it. I like the quarterback position, the running back position. I think after week 4 is going to be really dangerous when you pair Mark Ingram with Todd Gurley.
Well, and the thing I'm looking at too is like you mentioned wide receivers, and like I'm even looking at the waiver wire right now in our league, and wide receiver, the one reason why I didn't stress early is it is deep. Like Ted Ginn Jr. is still out there. You still got Mike Wallace out there who's with Philly this year. Travis Benjamin is still out there. There are guys still on the waiver wire that you can pick up. I mean, it's not super deep, but it's deep enough to where it's like there might be a few guys there that go off, and even if wide receivers, we need them, there'll be some there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what we were mentioning yesterday. We had another draft not part of this league.
Fantasy draft.
And we talked about that, and that's one of the things that you brought up is that, you know, wanting to make sure that you got enough running backs because wide receivers will be there. And that's what it seems like so many leagues are these days. It's so running back heavy.
Running back, wide receiver. That was my plan going in, and that's what I got for us.
And that is the strategy so often is that people want to get the top running backs. They're cool with trying to get good receivers and stuff like that as well, but getting running backs first and foremost, I think, is the most important thing and probably the most crucial part to your team. It's the running back. I mean, that's where I'm at, which is why I'm really happy with Todd Gurley. And minus his suspension, I also really like Mark Ingram. He was great last season.
No, he'll be fine after that suspension. We just got to get through the suspension for both him and Edelman.
And I was going to say, I think the wide receivers will look a lot better for us after week 4 when we can insert Julian Edelman.
Yeah, you got to think. When he comes back, because it's PPR, even if he doesn't have a ton of yards, Tom Brady's going to give him targets. I know.
10
That's
catches.
10 points.
Yep.
That's 10 points right there. Like, it's going to be fine. We just got to get through the first 4 weeks of the season.
So moving on to the next topic here, and it's the one that I previewed at the beginning of What's Your Fantasy here today, and that is Le'Veon Bell. Now, this is a big one, is that we are hearing that Le'Veon Bell is not yet signed. He has not signed anything. He has not showed up for anything. Right now, he is not playing week 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And while that may be concerning for a lot of people, a lot of fantasy owners, and I just drafted him yesterday, it's funny, you look at in the 5 years that Le'Veon Bell has been able to play a week 1 game, 3 of the years he did not play, some due to suspension, some due to injury. The 2 weeks I think that he has played, 1 week he had maybe 20-some carries for a little over 100 yards. Last year, 10 carries for 32 yards, I believe, in game 1 of the season. Ricky, how important is it for Le'Veon Bell to get signed and get out on the field for, obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers, but for fantasy owners as well? And how long can fantasy owners hold out hope that Le'Veon Bell is indeed coming back? Because this has been an ongoing thing back and forth with Bell and the Steelers brass that he does not care and he will not play at all until he feels valued by Pittsburgh, and he seems very content to not do so.
Well, and that was the thing, too, of like, if you looked at our draft and were in the stream on Saturday night, how the first 3 picks went out was we had basically the first 4 picks were all running backs. The first wide receiver didn't go until Antonio Brown went 5th overall. We had all running backs and wide receivers go in round 1 of the first 12 picks. But you look at the first 3. We were number 1. I took Todd Gurley because it's like if Le'Veon was coming back for sure, then it's a little bit of a debate in my mind because Le'Veon is arguably the best back in the league right now. But it's like Todd Gurley gives you that security. You know he's going to be there, barring injury. He's going to be playing for the LA Rams. The thing that I kind of feel like was interesting is Austin had the 2nd pick. Yeah, he really wanted Zeke in the first place because he wanted his team name to be Hide and Zeke. But he goes with Ezekiel Elliott over a Le'Veon Bell. And then it kind of like, it just keeps dominoing. Like, Tristan was there at 3. He ended up taking Le'Veon. But then it's a situation of like, do I take Le'Veon? Because when he is back, he's top 2 running back in the league. He's arguably top 1 pick. If he's not 1 pick, he's the 2nd pick. Or do you go with like a David Johnson, but he's coming off injury? Do you go with an Alvin Kamara? Do you kind of go for one of those next backs because you know he's going to be good, but he's not Le'Veon Bell? That's the thing. And for a fantasy owner that took Le'Veon Bell, I am praying that you went ahead and did your homework and looked for other backs as well. And in the 2 leagues I'm in, I'm going to throw you're one of them, and then I'm going to throw Tristan as well. So Tristan went ahead and took Le'Veon. His other running backs as of right now in our league are Tevin Coleman. Then he's got Jamal Williams, running back with the Green Bay Packers, Spencer Ware, and then he's got Naheem Hines with the Indianapolis Colts. From our league, our personal fantasy league, you were the one in that league that took Le'Veon Bell. Your other running backs is you've got Joe Mixon, then you have Royce Freeman, who you're happy with because as of today, it looks like he's going to be number 1 on the depth chart going into week 1. And then you also have Tevin Coleman. So if you went and got Le'Veon, I hope that you were able to grab a running back that could also be used as an RB1 if Le'Veon is not back for week 1 of the season.
I have a crazy question here for you.
Go ahead.
So let's say Le'Veon Bell is not back for week 1. Mm-hmm. Say he's not back for week 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say it gets to 3 to 5 weeks. Let's say James Conner is just absolutely crushing it. I mean, he's had a great preseason. He has shown the Steelers a lot of things. Mm-hmm. He has proven to them that he can be a legitimate running back, I believe. And he most likely right now is looking like he is going to be the starter for week 1. Let's say that Bell is not signed with the Steelers for the first couple of weeks. Would the Steelers say, we are going to go with James Conner. Mm-hmm. We're moving on from Le'Veon Bell, and he is going to no longer be a Pittsburgh Steeler, and the implications that could have on fantasy for James Conner. He's going to be the next up-and-coming guy. He's going to be the next up-and-coming guy at Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. That could be someone that you want to own. And then Le'Veon Bell, how if he's no longer with Pittsburgh, which would hate to see that happen, because you would really ruin and you lose a great dynamic that you have there with the killer bees of Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. Mm-hmm. But then what team he would go to, what that dynamic would be there. Who I couldn't even think of another team that he would be with right now because I only can picture him with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mm-hmm. What do you think of a situation like that? Do you think it would even ever get that drastic?
Well, before I answer your question, I'm going to do a little bit of a production with my headphones because I sound a little soft. Can you do me a favor and bump me up a little bit?
I can bump you up.
Yeah, because as I was talking last time, I'm wondering if I was a little bit too soft. James Conner is going to be interesting because my first thought while you asked the question was, do you handcuff? Like if you're a Le'Veon Bell owner, do you think about handcuffing James Conner to Le'Veon until you know for sure he's going to be back. Like, for example, I was looking at Tristan's team because he's the one in our league that has Le'Veon Bell. And with him, it's interesting because he's got 3 backs on his bench right now that I'm not super high on. Like Nyheim Hines with Indy, rookie, what's that running back situation even going to look like in Indy? Then you have Spencer Ware, where he was expected to be the leading rusher for KC last year, torn PCL. Kareem Hunt is now the number 1. So what is Spencer Ware? He's going to get his carries, but with Kareem Hunt being the number 1, how much of that is going to be Spencer Ware? I'm not saying drop either of those 2 guys. Then you have Jamal Williams, where, yeah, he's the number 1 right now in Green Bay, but what's that Green Bay offense going to look like this year? Where I feel like, oh, they got Aaron Rodgers, they're fine. A lot of people have been like, well, that team around Aaron Rodgers,
it's crumbling.
It's crumbling. And that is one where it's like, all right, I'm going to take a James Conner now, handcuff him to Le'Veon Bell. But then you kind of run the risk of, like me, when I dropped Alvin Kamara because I needed a wide receiver because of injuries after the draft, someone picked up Alvin Kamara the next week, and I lost Alvin Kamara for the entire year. The one guy I'm thinking about that you should maybe look for in your leagues to see if he's there, because to me he would be a better guy than Connor to kind of take in an absence potentially of Le'Veon Bell, and that's Frank Gore. Like in our league, there's 2. You could take CJ Anderson with Carolina, or you could take Frank Gore. And the reason why I bring up Frank Gore is I feel like he's going to be a touchdown vulture in Miami, where Kenyon Drake's going to do well. He's going to get most of the touches. But as you get into that red zone, down by the goal line, let's put in Frank Gore, bruiser right up the middle, run it in, and he's going to get most of the touchdowns in Miami. But those are 2 guys that you can obviously go with to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I take one of these guys, C.J. Anderson trying to get a revitalized career, of course, playing behind Christian McCaffrey, but also Frank Gore, a veteran, playing behind Kenyon Drake in Miami as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And just going back to the Steelers situation for a minute here, is back in 2016 when Le'Veon Bell missed the first 3 weeks, and D'Angelo Williams was the guy there. In week 1, Williams had 26 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, 28 receiving yards.
Williams was a proven vet, though, at this point. Like, Connors is way younger than
him. But what I'm trying to show you, though, is that while D'Angelo Williams is a proven vet, he really started to... I mean, you could see that he was losing a step in Carolina. That's why he was no longer in Carolina. He left Carolina. They still used Jonathan Stewart. Both of them had lost a step, but D'Angelo Williams lost a step much faster than Jonathan Stewart did. And then in week 2, he had 32 carries, 94 yards, 4 catches, 38 yards, and a touchdown. What do all these numbers sound like? The exact same numbers that Le'Veon Bell would be putting up because of his volume.
So you're saying it's more of the system.
It's more of the system because Mike Tomlin, what he likes to do is he likes to involve his running backs in all aspects of the game. He wants to give them as many carries as he possibly can. He wants to throw them the football, check down the football to them, have them run across the middle and get the ball there. I mean, these. If I were to tell you without saying the running back, and it was the Pittsburgh Steelers, 26 carries, 143, 2 TDs, you'd say Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
No, D'Angelo Williams, and D'Angelo Williams. But that's what I'm saying is that James Conner could have that same type of effect if he's getting that many opportunities to do so. So that's why I think that that's important. James Conner may very well be a person that you want to own in your leagues, and that we, Ricky, even could think about going and picking up as well. But I think with what you're saying with Frank Gore...
Well, I want to jump in and just say one thing, and this isn't me trying to... And also I'm going to say this because it kind of sounds like when we've mentioned people... We're going to reference a lot the MVP Fantasy League in this podcast during the league. So if I bring up your team name and kind of use you as a reference, I'm not doing it to poke fun at you. I'm just looking at what we have in it. And I'm going to bring up Tristan again, because He's the one that had Le'Veon. He had the 3rd pick. His next pick wasn't until the 22nd pick. He went with T.Y. Hilton. So he goes with wide receiver. One thing that I hope you did in a draft is, all right, I've got Le'Veon. That next pick, I thought, would have been wide receiver. Who went directly after him? The guy I wanted at 24, who Austin sniped from me at 23, Jordan Howard. So it's like, if you have Le'Veon, hopefully with that 2nd pick, I feel like if you drafted Le'Veon in the 1st round, that next pick, no matter where you are, I'm going with the running back because I don't know if Le'Veon is going to be there week 1.
I like what your thinking is with Frank Gore, someone who has Le'Veon Bell, going and getting Gore, or if he's still available, because he's a guy who a lot of people are not high on Kenyon Drake. A lot of people have a lot of red flags with Kenyon Drake, and a lot of people know exactly what Frank Gore will do. They know that he's a proven vet. He's an ageless wonder. He's a guy who certainly can still run the football and can be effective doing it. And
he's owned in 12% of ESPN leagues.
And everyone is looking at Kenyon Drake as being this guy who's going to be a breakout player, which while I do like him, I think that he will be good. There a couple of the red flags of him being, he'll get a lot of yards, but it usually comes on 1 or 2 big carries for him, and then he doesn't do much else after that, but his stats still look good because of those 2 big runs that he had. He'll have, 5 carries for 60 yards, but one of those carries was a 40-yarder type of deal. Frank Gore could be that guy that comes in, certainly, and is the touchdown vulture like you mentioned, get the goal line carries, and that could certainly cut into the work of Kenyon Drake, but certainly lift the value of Frank Gore. I just think right now with Le'Veon Bell, it's one of those things where it really puts Bell owners in a tough position. Certainly happy that we don't own him, because with all the suspended guys that we currently have, having Bell, who may not be going and playing week 1, isn't exactly what you would want either. But it's a really tough situation, and even from an outside of fantasy perspective, it's really hard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is really not something that they wanted to have to deal with, because it really focuses and hinges on them being able to be a playoff team or not being a playoff team. I think Le'Veon Bell right there in the balance is one of those types of things. But it is also true for fantasy teams of being a playoff team or not being a playoff team. When it comes down to the end and you're looking at it, it's like, well, if I wouldn't have had that one loss at the beginning of the year because Bell held out, that can screw you over. And that is exactly what it looks like could happen right now to fantasy owners.
Well, and that's like the one thing where you bring up Mark Ingram, I'll kind of talk about it a little bit. When I was in our draft, so we had the 1st pick. So that means our next pick wasn't until 24. And like I said, I knew running back is where I wanted to go. Jordan Howard was falling. And in my head, I'm thinking, Jordan Howard is who I want. Please let him fall. Austin, I'm still going to say, you snaked him from me. You took him right from me the pick before. Then I had a decision to make. I had you look at the next best backs. You've got Royce Freeman was there. Derrick Henry was there. Kenyon Drake. Jerick McKinnon. I was going to take him. He got auto-drafted to a team because they didn't have him on the IR before that. Joe Mixon. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I like Royce Freeman. Brandon likes Royce Freeman. I'm like, but for my second RB2, that's a lot of faith to be putting into a rookie. And I'm like, we got Todd Gurley. That means my next guy, if Todd Gurley goes down, I'm saying Royce Freeman's my number 2. I couldn't do it. So for me, I was looking at guys I could be with that. I'm not high on Tennessee. Derrick Henry, I was like, I'm going to kind of avoid that. Kenyon Drake, I'm one of the ones not high on him as well. So I avoided it. Joe Mixon will never be on a fantasy team of mine for personal reasons. So for me, it was really Lamar Miller, although everything I despise about Lamar Miller with yours and mine's Madden 2018 franchise where he kept getting injured
Every time.
and each time he got healthy, I'm like, Brandon, can we trade him? And you're like, no, he's a good running back. And then he'd get injured again. And then we'd have Deonta Foreman, who would be our running back. It was either him or Mark Ingram, and that's where I made the decision, hey, I know he's suspended, but when he comes back, he's Mark Ingram. But then luckily with how the draft played out, I still got us Lamar Miller 24 picks later at 48.
And you know what? I think that, again, Lamar Miller is going to be one of those guys. He's a veteran. He's certainly going to be the starter for a couple of weeks because Deonta Foreman is not ready yet to come back, I don't think, even in play. And then he certainly wouldn't be ready to be the starter. But Lamar Miller is one of those guys he's kind of safe to go with him. He's probably not going to do anything flashy anymore. But he's a guy who can still run the football fairly effectively, but behind an offensive line of Houston, which is really not that good, it's going to be, I think, a little tougher for him to be able to do that. His health has always been a thing from his days in Miami, and then you've got him being able to catch some passes out of the backfield. So he's one of those guys who I'm not upset about that pick. I'm not upset about having him on the team. But he's just not someone who's going to flash a whole lot. His flashy days, I think, are for the most part behind him. But he's one of those picks, again, that, like I said, is safe.
I want to ask you this when it comes to, because you're a Le'Veon Bell owner, so I'll ask you this. Let's say they come out and say, well, you know what? He is not going to play week 1. Or let's say he's not going to play week 2. Because like Mark Weber said in our group chat, was basically, he said he was going to hold out until he got a long-term deal. So until he gets that deal, he ain't playing. As a Le'Veon Bell owner, I know we talked about Frank Gore, I mentioned C.J. Anderson. The other guys that are listed above, in my mind, aren't really above, because it's like guys like Andre Ellington, probably not going to get anything in Houston. T.J. Yeldon's interesting, but like the one I look at is, and I know we mentioned with Jamal Williams, the team he's on. Do you think there's any value in looking at, let's say Gore's gone, C.J. Anderson's gone, looking at a guy like Ty Montgomery to possibly help out in some way with your fantasy team if Bell isn't coming back for those first 2 weeks?
Maybe, but call me crazy and you will, is I might look to the Cleveland Browns. They've got Nick Chubb, Duke Johnson, Carlos Hyde. Now, you can't tell me that Carlos Hyde is going to be the starter for the entire season.
No, if you talk about the Madden game I played yesterday, I'd cut him because he fumbled and I lost the game. The Jets beat me because of Carlos Hyde. So just like many games Ricky plays, because you screwed me over in fantasy, I'm not too happy with you right now, Carlos. Not too happy. But I'll live and I'll win the next one.
I absolutely love it. But yeah, I think that
started Baker too. Baker played really good too.
Yeah, that's good.
That's besides the point.
That's good. I think that someone like Nick Chubb is not necessarily a bad idea, or going with someone like a Duke Johnson if he is still there.
See, and that's the thing.
Is not a bad thing. But in a PPR league, Duke Johnson is a lot more valued and highly valued than if it was just a standard league. A standard league, Duke Johnson, not so much. PPR, absolutely.
Here's the thing, though, and this is going off of ESPN, and I know ESPN isn't all. There's a ton of other leagues, but in 90% of fantasy leagues on ESPN, Carlos Hyde taken in 90% of them, Duke Johnson taken in 90% of them, so there's a good chance that neither of those two are available at this point. The best one that's available you're looking at is Nick Chubb, who's only taken in about 37% of ESPN leagues.
And Nick Chubb, he's one of those guys, if he stays healthy, we saw what he could do at Georgia when he was healthy. He was an outstanding running back.
But will he get the touches, or will he get the injury?
Time? Will he get the time to show and prove to people that he is good and that it's translating to the NFL? Now, I'm not as worried about him cutting into Duke Johnson's work, because Duke Johnson will continue to be the receiving back. You could probably move Duke Johnson to just be a receiver. You probably could. It's, will he be able to cut in to Carlos Hyde's work? Carlos Hyde, for a number of years, when he was with San Francisco, people continued to say at the beginning of the season, it's Carlos Hyde, San Francisco, he's not going to do much. he proved them wrong every single year. Every single year, it seemed like he actually got better, and he did improve, and his fantasy stats looked better, and he was someone that you actually wanted to own. So if he falls back any bit in Cleveland, I would think that Nick Chubb would get more opportunities. And again, Nick Chubb is one of those guys. He's very similar, in a similar situation that Kerryon Johnson is. Kerryon Johnson would be another guy that I would go after and get. I'm not saying that either one is going to be the next Barry Sanders, but
some big shoes to fill.
It'd be some big shoes to fill, and especially, talking from the Detroit side. But LeGarrette Blount, Theo Riddick, Amir Abdullah. Those aren't names that you should be shuddering at if you're a Kerryon Johnson, or if you're the Lions coaching staff, because Kerryon Johnson brings to you a lot of elements. He's a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a really tough runner, an upright runner, everything like that. Really strong core, tough to bring him down. That takes care of your LeGarrette Blount. That takes care of your Theo Riddick. And you should be able to be the guy. So that's another guy maybe to look at. But again, with Nick Chubb, I think that someone like that is not going to start right away. Even maybe by week 5, week 6, he's still not. But he's hopefully starting to get more involved in that offense so that people can at least see, okay, the coaching staff believes in him more. He's doing that. But if Carlos Hyde's going steady, he may not.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention about the Detroit thing is, first off, remember Joique Bell? Just popped up on my screen.
Yes.
I'm like, I remember when he used to be a running back for Detroit. But, I mean, looking at the backs you just mentioned to kind of see if they're available in your league, Kerryon Johnson, he is 86%. He is owned in 86% of ESPN leagues. Then the next highest is Theo Riddick. He's owned in about half of ESPN leagues. And then you have LeGarrette Blount, who's owned in about 30% of ESPN leagues. Amir Abdullah, owned in about just over 1% of ESPN leagues. So that's how the Detroit backs kind of play out. But one question I want to ask you, and this might get away from the running backs a bit, but stay on this injury question. I want to ask you, if you're a Carson Wentz owner and you drafted Carson Wentz, what should be your game plan for week 1? Let's say you're one of those guys where you took Wentz and you might not have drafted a backup option. If you are a Carson Wentz owner, what are you thinking about week 1 of the NFL season?
I'm thinking, oh crap, my starting quarterback is not starting for week 1, and they play on Thursday.
There were a few guys in our fantasy league that were like, oh man, I really wanted to take Wentz, but I was nervous to take Wentz.
Yeah. I would definitely go and look, and many times you can still find a starting quarterback, a fairly solid starting quarterback. You're not going to get any of the top ones, but you could probably still find, honestly, an Alex Smith. You could probably find an Alex Smith out there. I mean, depending on
the top 3, I'll say in ours are Blake Bortles is number 1, Case Keenum is number 2. Andy Dalton, number 3.
I'm going Case Keenum.
Okay.
I'm going out there to get Case Keenum because he's got a number of weapons out there.
Joe
in
Flacco
Denver.
is also available as well.
I'd go with Case Keenum. I like the weapons that he has out there with Emmanuel Sanders and with Demaryius Thomas. Then you've got Cortland Sutton that went out there. I mean, I think that there's a number of pieces out there for Case Keenum to throw to, and if you're putting stock into what Case Keenum did last year with the Minnesota Vikings, thrown into a role that no one really was expecting, and then performing at a level that many people were not expecting. I think you go Case Keenum and you can feel pretty good about that, especially for week 1, week 2. We don't know right now with Carson Wentz, because the Eagles have just said he's not going to start week 1, but they have not said that he'll be back for week 2 or put a timeline on when he'll be back. That's the problem.
Do you let's say you're in a little bit of a deeper league. Like we're in 12. 12's kind of standard. Let's say you're in like a 16, 20-man league where 20 men is like, whoa, that's a lot of people in a league. We only did that once, and Mike Rankin said he hated it. But if you're in, let's say...
That's why he's not here. He left.
Let's say you're in a 20-man league. Let's say guys like the Case Keenum are not there. Do you think to say, all right, I'm just going to go with Wentz's backup and take a Nick Foles?
You might. You definitely might, especially, again, if you're putting stock into what Nick Foles did last year when Carson Wentz was injured.
8% of ESPN leagues, Nick Foles.
See, people want to stay away from Nick Foles because they remember the stuff that he did that was poor, but everyone seems to forget how good Nick Foles was at one point. And everyone seems to forget what happened after the Carson Wentz injury last year. Nick Foles played pretty darn well. When Carson Wentz went down, I'm like, Nick Foles not going to go well. And it went really, really well, clearly. So I think that going for Nick Foles, not a bad idea at all.
Here's a question I'm going to ask you, and this is kind of a double-edged sword for us as we get into this year. And I might not do it, depending on if you tell me to stop doing it. But yet again, looking at the league we're in with the fans, looking at the owner of Carson Wentz, and that's Kevin Cruz, who has him in our league. And here's the two quarterbacks he's got. He's got Carson Wentz, and he's got Tyrod Taylor. I'm putting you in the shoes of Kevin Cruz. If those were your two options after the draft, Wentz ain't playing this week, Tyrod Taylor, not Tyrod, Tyrod Taylor is going up against Pittsburgh. What are you doing? Are you starting Tyrod, or are you hitting the waiver wire to find a quarterback for week 1 because Cleveland's going up against Pittsburgh in their first game?
I am definitely going to the waiver wire. Without a doubt. I'm going to the waiver wire, and I'm getting Case Keenum right now. I'm getting Case Keenum right now, and I'm dropping Tyrod Taylor because not going to need him, and he's not even going to be the starting quarterback all season long.
By at least week 3.
That would definitely be the hope. But at the same time, if you draft Case Keenum, but if you go get Case Keenum, outside of an injury, Case Keenum's going to be the starting quarterback all season long.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is that
at that point it's just matchups. It's what matchup do you want to play?
And with Tyrod, he is not the long-term solution in Cleveland. No. Not even close.
But
and everyone knows it.
Benched within the first 2, but that's not the point.
No, probably not. But I'm still saying, that's the whole thing. I mean, if you really wanted to, if you were really, really in a pinch, you could always go and try and get Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, he filled in last year, and he did a serviceable job. He's filling in for the first, 3-4 games this year as well.
3 games.
For Tampa Bay, and I don't see why he would do a really poor job. I think that, about 200, 250 yards, couple of scores, each week is probably what you could expect out of him. If you need someone, you just need him for the first couple of weeks.
Here's what I'm thinking, and to go off this situation, if I have Carson Wentz and Tyrod's my backup, I'm with you. I'm dropping Tyrod in a heartbeat because, like I said, hopefully Wentz is back week 3 is what they've been saying. Wentz and Jeffrey will probably come back at the same time. Cleveland's first 2 games of the year, home against the Steelers, which is a tough defense to play, and then at New Orleans. Not defenses I want to be going up against if I have my fantasy quarterback in there, unless it's like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers type of guy. And just to kind of look at, you say Case Keenum, Seattle game 1, which is iffy because it's in Denver, it's not in Seattle, so that's one thing. But Seattle's defense is not what it used to be, so that may be more favorable than the Cleveland Steelers. And then the Broncos got the Ravens at home, or not the Ravens, the Raiders at home. The next game, people are way lower on the Raiders than they are the New Orleans Saints. So even that alone makes Case Keenum more of a favorable option in Wentz's absence than a Tyrod Taylor. Or you go up with, and this is the other one that you think of, and I'm going off of our league, or do you go with a guy like Blake Bortles where the defense is going to help him out? He's got the Giants week 1, Patriots week 2. The Patriots have Tom Brady, but that Patriot defense is not a strength of that team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you really kind of did a good look at situational. I mean, if that's what you're looking at, you definitely don't want to have Tyrod Taylor. You don't. I mean, against those two defenses, absolutely not. Case Keenum, again, I think not only because he's got weapons to be able to throw to, and he's showed that he's a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle's defense, like you mentioned, they're old, or they're gone, or they're certainly not who they once were. They don't really strike fear into people anymore, which is why I think Seattle's going to have a down year. I think that even some of their offensive pieces are getting a little older. They at running back, they're not sure who they're going to go with. Is it Chris Carson? Is it going to be Rashad Penny? Seattle is one of those teams where it's like, but defensively, certainly. So I think that that's another reason I like Case Keenum there. And then Joe Flacco actually isn't a bad option because I think the addition of Michael Crabtree there is going to be really helpful for him. I mean, it's a good wide receiver. Michael Crabtree is also a great red zone target, and that's where they'll probably target him a whole lot is there in the red zone. So Joe Flacco could get points that way, having a big guy to be able to go to. But that's where I think that's at. That's just me. A final thing that I wanted to get into, Ricky, to kind of wrap it up is that week 1 is quickly approaching. Thursday, we have Thursday night football. I am so
NFL's
excited.
back, baby.
I'm so excited. It's going to be a great game, a nice rematch of a playoff game from last season with the Falcons and the Eagles. It's going to be great. Ricky, but what I wanted to ask, though, with week 1 fast approaching, what do you expect? What are some of the things that you're looking for in week 1, some of your predictions in week 1 with you pick the player and what you expect to happen with them? It could be something that you are looking, that you think is going to happen that's going to be good, something that you're thinking is going to happen that's going to be bad. It could be going right in line with what everyone else most likely thinks, or what you love to do, go right in line with what no one else thinks.
Yeah, that's usually what I do, and I've got kind of 3 thoughts, and I want to go ahead and maybe that third thought might be a little far-fetched, so I'm not going to mention, but I've got 2 for sure. 2 things that I'm kind of looking at is, the first one is Andrew Luck. Is everyone wants to know what he's going to be like coming back, and I know in our personal league, Mark Weber's in a conundrum this week because Mark Weber in our league has Andrew Luck and Carson Wentz. Well, he ain't playing Carson Wentz. So it looks like he's playing Andrew Luck. And if you're weary about Andrew Luck and you might be in a similar situation, I'm going to say don't worry too much about Luck week 1. He's at home going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, for going off of total fantasy points scored by defenses last year, the Bengals were near the bottom. They were 88. The lowest team were the Raiders at 55. This is a Bengals team that is the 30th. They have the 30th best matchup with the, if you're a Colts player going up against this D. So, I mean, for me, I feel like Andrew Luck is going to have a big week 1, kind of cementing him back on the scene. The other one, and this might be a little bit of a hot take based off of the news that was just revolved around today. If you drafted the Ravens defense, expect a big game from the Ravens. 5-pick Peterman is back. He's going to make it count in Baltimore. Baltimore's going to win big, and 5-pick Peterman will give the Raven fantasy owner some hope. It's going to have a big fantasy performance from the Ravens defense.
I do not doubt it.
5-pick Peterman, man. That to me, and I know we're going to talk about it in the onside kick tomorrow. How, and I'm just asking this question. I'm not going to give my thoughts. You'll find it out tomorrow. How do you trade up to take a top quarterback in the draft and then you start 5-pick? I don't get the decision to start Nathan Peterman over Josh Allen. I know he's not ready, but what else do you got? It's not like you got Aaron Rodgers in front of him. Like, come on. But that's besides the point. What are you thinking? What are you thinking about this?
I'm thinking that you're really upset.
That news got me a little heated today. Got me a little heated because the Bills being Bills and doing stupid things. But what do you got?
So what I've got is also some news that came out today, or that will be coming out today, is that atop the depth chart is going to be Royce Freeman in Denver. Royce Freeman's going to have 70 yards and a pair of touchdowns week 1. against Seattle. He's going to have himself a nice day, and he's going to start off a new era in Denver as they are going to finally have a running game. They'll win that first game, but Royce Freeman is going to show why Denver got him in the third round and why he's a steal in the third round. So that's what I think for Royce Freeman. And then also, this is probably way out there. And I'm just saying it because, honestly, we have no idea, yes or no. But Mitch Trubisky is going to throw for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Packers. And they'll still lose. But Mitch Trubisky is going to come out. He's going to light it up. And he's going to show people, because no one has seen, as I've said to you now many times, we've talked about it today, no one has seen what Mitch Trubisky really can do. We saw some flashes last season, but nothing that went anything more than a quick flash of lightning. That was it. And that's how much the Bears wanted. Oh, you got to pull him back. He's doing too much. Mitch Trubisky is going to be let loose. You're free, baby. Fly. And he is going to fly. And with his new toys, he's going to be having a fun time. Again, I don't think the Bears will win the game, but Mitch Trubisky is going to show that the Bears did a really good thing by paying a lot to go get him.
Last thing I want to do, and I want to throw an addition onto this that I want to do each and every week.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of like a name we can call this. Maybe they can help us out. Maybe something like I'll see it when I believe it, or like when pigs fly. This is basically each week we'll pick a player, a defense, like some position to be like, not many people are going to think this player or this defense is going to be good, but you can put them in your starting lineup and maybe get a sneaky performance. Like, ooh, this player, most people not going to get 5 points. 14-point performance out of this guy.
Yeah.
The team I'm thinking of, it is a defense, Brandon. The Bears defense. If you got the Bears defense, sneaky team this week against the Packers. Really good defense last year. They add Khalil Mack. They're going to use them smartly, they said. They're going to make smart decisions with them, not overuse them. That's a team where some people may think, oh, Packers are going to win that game, but the Bears defense this year could get you double-digit fantasy points, maybe even like 15 to 18 fantasy points in a sneaky performance against the Packers.
Yeah, I think
I know I'm surprising you with it, but who would you go with?
I think you're right. Well, how about this? Everyone has been talking about Khalil Mack. Mack is gone. Raider Nation.
We got a segment about
What are you going to do? You aren't going to know until a couple of years if that was a good trade, a bad trade, or what. But right now,
because you gave up 2 first-round picks.
Well, because right now it looks like a bad trade because you need him now to be able to win. But what they're not looking at is the offense and a guy who could be sneaky because he's a little older, but he's still got talent. Jordy Nelson. You put him into your lineup in week 1. Someone has to play across from Amari Cooper.
Derek Carr's
and it's going to be
somebody.
Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson has a sneaky good week 1 with the Oakland Raiders.
You know who else could be a good... Well, that's what we'll call it, sneaky good players of the week. You know who else could be a sneaky good player this week for the Raiders? The muscle hamster. Is he going to overtake the job from Marshawn Lynch? Is Marshawn Lynch even going to be the number 1 this year? I think that the muscle hamster, not week 1 for sure. That's why he wasn't a sneaky good player of the week for me. But he could be one over time that it's like he's number 2, Lynch is number 1. And throughout the season, it just goes, whoop, hey, I'm ahead of you. And he's number 1 on the depth chart in Oakland.
Yeah, well, they were really loving what Doug Martin was doing in the offseason and preseason, and they've really liked that. So if Marshawn Lynch falters at all, which like he did at times last season, he ended the year running well, but he had a lot of times last season where it was not good.
And who's got him in our league, Brandon? You know who's got him in our league?
We do.
We got the muscle hamster.
We do.
Brandon's smiling like, I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll see.
I don't mind it because I think that if he can stay away from suspension and injury, he actually could be pretty good. But that is where we are going to leave it this week on What's Your Fantasy, the last episode before we actually get into week 1 of fantasy football. Again, it starts this week, Thursday night Falcons, Eagles. I
Can't
am
wait.
so excited. I'm so excited. It is going to be, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm so excited. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Football is back. College football is happening. NFL is about to start. We are in one of the best times of the year. And then there's Christmas, the second best time of the year. But again, folks, make sure you go to patreon.com if you want to support the channel, if you want to support this podcast, What's Your Fantasy, $10 a month, and you can come and be on this podcast, talk fantasy football with Ricky and I, and who doesn't want to talk fantasy football? Like, there's football that you can talk, which is really fun and exciting, but there's fantasy football that you can talk, which is, like, even better, possibly.
It's better when the players get into it, too, like MJD, where it's like, screw you guys, kneel at the one. Hey, back up, take it in for the score.
Oh, my gosh. I always worry that that's going to be my guy when I need him.
99-yard touchdown, down at the one. Hey, back up, taking the score. I don't care about these fantasy owners.
And then, of course, for a MVP t-shirt, head to our store on mostvaluablepodcast.com. You can get one. I believe Dave is modeling it. So if people actually start buying them, we'll have to make sure that someone else starts to model it instead of Dave. And then, of course, you can check us out on iTunes and give us that 5-star rating. As Ricky said at the beginning of the show, we are still working out some things for you to be able to rate What's Your Fantasy, but you can go on, you can rate the Primetime Podcast, the Fast Break, and, of course, the Onside Kick, and all the other great podcasts that we have out there as well, that 5-star rating. And as Ricky always says, we're not just a couple of good old boys.
We're not a couple of good old boys at all. We didn't talk about the SEC at all on this podcast, but we had no reason to. So that's why we're not a couple of good old boys.
Well, folks, again, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you again for tuning in for episode number 2 of What's Your Fantasy? For Ricky Widmer, I'm Brandon Swanson saying so long and enjoy your NFL week and weekend.